During the fire, the Alpha King's beta pushed him into the flames and ran, then a waitress saved him. Why would the Alpha King's own beta abandon him when he needed him most? And what could make a waitress risk everything to save him? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another emotional story of courage, loyalty, and destiny. Thank you for spending your time with us and for continuing to support the channel. Your presence means more than you know. Tell us in the comments, if someone you trusted abandoned you in your darkest moment, could you ever trust them again? Now, settle in, stay with us, and let us return to the beginning, where one unexpected moment was about to change everything. Do not leave him in there. Emily Carter shouted, but the words vanished beneath the fire alarm and the frightened rush of people pouring toward the exits. Smoke rolled through Blackwood Lodge, turning the elegant ballroom into a maze of shadows and flashing emergency lights. Emily stood near the service corridor with one hand pressed over her mouth, her waitress uniform smelling of smoke, her eyes fixed on two figures 30 feet away. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood was moving through the haze with Mason Reed, the beta trusted above everyone else in the Northern Territories. Adrian appeared disoriented, but Mason knew the lodge. He knew the exits. He was supposed to lead his king to safety. For one desperate second, Emily believed that was exactly what he intended to do. Then Mason looked over his shoulder. His eyes met hers. Something cold passed across his face. He turned toward Adrian, made one sudden movement, and sent the Alpha King stumbling through the doorway into the smoke-filled room beyond. Mason pulled the door nearly closed behind him and ran. Emily stopped breathing. She had seen it. She had seen everything. Mason, she called. He did not turn around. Guests streamed past her toward the main entrance. Someone grabbed Emily's arm and shouted for her to get outside, but she barely heard him. Her attention remained on that doorway. Adrian had disappeared behind the smoke. The alarm continued its relentless cry. Somewhere overhead, the sprinkler system had begun pouring water across the ballroom, soaking white tablecloths and abandoned dinner plates. Emily's heart hammered so hard that each beat seemed to carry one command. Run. Every sensible instinct agreed. She was a 24-year-old Omega waitress. She had no royal training, no authority, and no reason to believe she could help a powerful Alpha King in a crisis that had already driven trained guards toward the exits. She took 3 steps toward safety. Then she heard a muffled cough behind the door. Emily stopped. Around her, people kept moving away. She looked toward the main entrance, where cold winter air waited beyond the open doors. Safety was less than 40 feet away. Then she looked back. The man behind that door had just been abandoned by the person he trusted most. Emily did not know why Mason had done it. She did not know whether Adrian could even hear her. She knew only one thing. He was alone. Emily, come on, one of the kitchen workers shouted from the exit. Her fingers trembled. Fear told her that surviving meant following everyone else. Something deeper refused. Emily turned away from the exit. She pulled a damp service towel from a nearby cart and covered her mouth. Then the quiet Omega whom almost nobody in that lodge had noticed all evening began walking against the fleeing crowd. Everyone else was running out. Emily Carter was going back. 12 hours earlier, Emily Carter had arrived at Blackwood Lodge believing the hardest part of her day would be surviving another double shift without spilling coffee on someone important. Snow covered the surrounding pines in thick white layers, and the mountain air carried the clean bite of winter as she hurried from the employee parking lot toward the service entrance. At 24, Emily had become good at being unnoticed. In a world where rank entered a room before personality did, an Omega waitress learned quickly that invisibility could be useful. She tied her dark apron around her waist, pinned back a loose strand of brown hair, and stepped into the kitchen just as the dinner staff began preparing for the royal gathering. "You are late," her manager, Mr. Collins, said without looking at the clock. Emily glanced at it. She was 7 minutes early. "I will make them up somehow," she replied. A dishwasher nearby hid a smile. Emily grabbed a tray and started helping before anyone could assign her the worst job. By 4 that afternoon, the lodge had transformed. Crystal glasses gleamed beneath chandeliers. White linen covered more than 30 tables. Outside, black vehicles arrived one after another, carrying Alpha families, council members, and representatives from PACs across the Northern Territories. Inside, everyone seemed determined to remind the staff that important people were coming. Emily was carrying a stack of folded napkins when she found 16-year-old Noah, the newest busboy, standing frozen beside the pantry door. His face had gone pale. "I cannot do this," he whispered. "There are kings in there." "One king," Emily corrected softly. "The rest are just people wearing expensive jackets." Noah gave her a frightened look. "That does not help." Emily smiled and placed half the napkins in his hands. "Then do not serve the whole room. Serve one table. After that, serve another." His breathing slowed. "What if I mess up?" "Then you clean it up and keep going." "That is what the rest of us do." Noah nodded. Neither of them noticed Mason Reed standing at the end of the corridor until he spoke. "Encouraging the staff?" Emily turned. She recognized him immediately from news photographs. The Alpha King's Beta looked perfectly at home among polished wood and quiet authority, his charcoal suit immaculate, his expression pleasant enough to invite trust. "He was nervous," Emily said. Mason glanced at Noah, then back at her. Tonight would be a poor night for mistakes. The warmth left Noah's face. Emily stepped slightly between them without thinking. "Then we will make sure there are none." Mason studied her for 1 second longer than necessary. "What is your name?" "Emily Carter." Something unreadable flickered behind his smile. Then footsteps sounded from the main entrance. Conversations throughout the lodge faded almost instantly. Emily looked through the open service doors and saw a tall man removing a black winter coat while pack leaders lowered their heads around him. He wore no crown. He needed none. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood had arrived. Emily expected him to look at the nobles waiting to greet him. Instead, his gaze crossed the crowded room and stopped, inexplicably, on her. For one strange second, Emily forgot that she was supposed to look away. Adrian Blackwood stood beneath the lodge chandelier while council members gathered around him, yet his attention remained fixed across the room. On her. Emily's fingers tightened around the folded napkins. She had seen photographs of the Alpha King before, but photographs had failed to capture the stillness surrounding him. He did not demand attention. The room simply gave it to him. His dark suit was simple compared with the ceremonial clothing worn by several pack leaders, and silver touched the edges of his black hair, making him look more tired than the legends ever allowed. Then Mason stepped into Adrian's path, and the moment broke. Emily exhaled. "You should probably breathe," Noah whispered beside her. I was breathing. Not convincingly. She handed him the remaining napkins. Table 6. By 6:30, every seat in the main dining room was occupied. Emily moved between tables carrying coffee, sparkling water, and dinner plates while conversations about territory agreements and winter supply routes drifted around her. Adrian sat at table 7 with Mason and 4 senior council members. Emily avoided looking toward him until a sharply dressed alpha woman at table 5 snapped her fingers. "Waitress." Emily approached. "Yes, ma'am?" The woman pointed at her water glass. "I asked for lemon." Emily looked at the untouched lemon wedge resting beside the glass. "Of course. I will bring another one. I asked 10 minutes ago." Emily knew that was not true. She had delivered the drink less than 3 minutes earlier. Still, she picked up the glass. "I apologize." "You people always apologize after getting something wrong." Several guests glanced over. Heat touched Emily's cheeks. She could feel Noah watching from the service station, probably imagining himself in her place. Emily set the glass carefully on her tray. Then I will try to give you fewer reasons to hear it. The woman stared at her, uncertain whether she had been challenged. Emily offered a polite smile and walked away before her courage disappeared. At table 7, Adrian lowered his coffee cup. Their eyes met again. This time Emily saw something unexpected in his expression. Amusement. Not at her. With her. She returned with fresh water and lemon, then continued working. 20 minutes later, she passed table 7 carrying a tray when Adrian spoke. Miss Carter. Emily stopped so suddenly the glasses rattled. She had never told him her name. Her gaze flicked toward Mason. The beta was watching her. Your Majesty? Adrian gestured toward his coffee. Would you mind? Of course. She poured carefully. Up close, she noticed how tired his gray eyes looked. He noticed her noticing. Long evening, she asked before remembering who she was speaking to. One councilman frowned. Mason's expression sharpened. Adrian only looked at her. Very. Emily nodded toward the crowded room. At least nobody has complained about your lemon. Silence held for half a second. Then Adrian laughed. It was quiet, genuine, and apparently rare enough that everyone at the table stared. Emily felt herself smile. Thank you, Miss Carter, he said. Emily is fine. Mason's gaze moved between them. Emily, Adrian repeated. Something about the way he said it made the noise of the room seem farther away. Then Emily caught another scent beneath the coffee and polished wood. Faint. Chemical. Wrong. She turned toward the Western Service corridor. The smell vanished almost immediately, but the uneasy feeling remained. When she looked back, Mason was no longer watching Adrian. He was watching her. Emily told herself Mason's attention meant nothing. He was the Alpha King's beta. Watching a room full of strangers was probably part of his job. Still, when she carried her empty tray toward the kitchen, she could feel his gaze following her until the service doors swung shut behind her. The kitchen offered temporary relief. Plates clattered, cooks called orders, and the familiar smell of roasted vegetables and fresh bread pushed away the strange chemical scent she had noticed near the western corridor. Emily set down her tray and reached for another. Table 12 needs coffee, Mr. Collins called. And stay out of the west hallway. Royal security is using it. Emily paused. Since when? Since someone important decided it. That answer should have been enough. It almost was. 20 minutes later, Emily was carrying clean glasses from the pantry when voices stopped her near the west hallway. Mason stood around the corner with a man Emily did not recognize. The stranger wore a dark overcoat despite the warmth inside the lodge, and his voice was low enough that Emily caught only fragments. Before the council vote, the stranger said. Mason answered even more quietly. Everything is arranged. Emily froze. She had no reason to assume the conversation meant anything sinister. Powerful people made arrangements every day. Still, something in Mason's tone tightened the muscles between her shoulders. She shifted the glasses against her chest, intending to retreat before either man noticed her. One glass tapped softly against another. The conversation stopped. Emily closed her eyes for half a second. Footsteps approached. Mason appeared around the corner alone. His expression was pleasant again, almost warm. Emily Carter. She hated that he remembered her full name. Sir. He glanced toward the tray in her hands. Were you looking for something? The pantry. That is behind you. I found it. His smile remained, but his eyes did not change. How long have you been standing there? Emily's heartbeat quickened. Long enough to realize I took the wrong hallway. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Mason stepped aside. Good. I would hate for a member of the staff to become confused about matters that do not concern her. Emily nodded once and walked past him. She refused to hurry until she reached the kitchen. Only then did she release the breath trapped in her lungs. Noah was arranging dessert plates near the counter. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Just Mason Reed." Noah raised his eyebrows. "That might be worse." Emily almost laughed, but the chemical smell returned. Stronger this time. She turned toward the Western service door. Beneath the ordinary sense of coffee and hot food was something sharp and unfamiliar. Her omega senses had never been impressive, yet they were rarely wrong about danger. She followed the smell through the service corridor until she reached the emergency exit. A red sign glowed above it. Emily pressed the push bar. Nothing happened. She tried again. The door did not move. Her stomach dropped. Emergency exits at Blackwood Lodge were never locked during events. She bent closer and saw something wedged near the mechanism. Before she could examine it, a voice came from behind her. "Miss Carter." Emily straightened slowly. Mason stood at the end of the empty corridor. This time, he was not smiling. For a moment, Emily and Mason simply stared at each other across the empty corridor. The sounds of dinner service seemed strangely distant behind the closed kitchen doors. Emily could hear the ventilation system humming overhead and the faint music drifting from the ballroom. Mason approached without hurry. "That hallway is restricted," he said. His voice was calm again, but Emily trusted the calm even less than his silence. "The emergency exit is not opening. Security locked several access points for the royal gathering." Emily looked at the glowing red exit sign. "An emergency exit?" Mason's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Royal security has procedures you would not understand." The familiar instinct to lower her eyes surfaced, but Emily resisted it. "Then someone should tell Mr. Collins. Staff were assigned this route if we need to evacuate." Mason stopped several feet from her. "I will handle it." "I can tell him." "That will not be necessary." The words were polite. The meaning was not. Emily nodded and stepped around him, but as she passed, the sharp chemical odor returned. It seemed stronger near Mason's jacket. She kept walking. Only after reaching the kitchen did she allow herself to breathe normally. Mr. Collins was checking dessert orders beside the preparation counter. "The west emergency exit will not open," Emily said. He barely looked up. "Mason Reed says security has it handled." "Did he tell you that?" Mr. Collins finally glanced at her. "He told me staff should stay out of that corridor." Emily lowered her voice. "Emergency doors are not supposed to be blocked. Emily, we have half the Northern Council eating dinner 20 feet away. Do not create a problem where there is not one." She wanted to argue. Instead, she looked toward Noah. The teenager had heard everything. His worried expression told her she was not imagining the danger. "Use the east service exit if anything happens," Emily told him. Mr. Collins sighed. "Nothing is going to happen." Emily returned to the dining room, but the evening had changed. Every small detail seemed louder now. Mason speaking quietly into his phone. A security officer leaving the western side of the ballroom after Mason whispered something to him. Adrian checking his watch as the council prepared for its private vote. Emily carried coffee to table 7 and tried not to show how uneasy she felt. Adrian noticed anyway. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Mason looked up immediately. Emily hesitated. She could mention the door. The strange smell. The conversation she had overheard. But she had nothing except instinct, and Mason Reed had years of trust behind his name. "One of the emergency exits is not working," she said. Adrian's expression changed at once. Mason answered before he could. "Already addressed. Security protocol." Adrian looked at him. "During a full lodge event?" "Temporary measure." Mason smiled. "I will explain after the vote." Adrian held his gaze for a second, then nodded. Emily walked away with a cold feeling in her stomach. 10 minutes later, she was near the service station when the lights flickered once. Then twice. Noah looked at her. The chemical smell suddenly became unmistakable. Emily turned toward the western corridor. A thin gray haze curled beneath the door. She had just enough time to whisper, "Something is wrong," before the fire alarm began to scream. The alarm shattered every conversation in the ballroom. For half a second, nobody moved. Then the western doors opened and a ribbon of gray smoke slipped along the ceiling. Chairs scraped against the floor. Guests rose at once, voices overlapping as royal guards called for everyone to remain calm and move toward the main entrance. Emily did not wait for instructions. "Noah, east exit," she said. The teenager stood frozen beside the service station, staring at the smoke. Emily caught his attention. "Look at me. Remember what I told you earlier. One thing at a time." His breathing steadied enough for him to nod. "Take Mrs. Bennet and the gentleman beside her. Use the East Service Hall." Noah swallowed. "What about you?" "I am right behind you." Emily crossed to an elderly woman struggling to move through the crowd and offered her arm. Another older guest followed, confused by the flashing emergency lights. Emily guided all three toward the kitchen, where staff were already filing toward the eastern exit. Cold air rushed inside when Noah pushed open the door. Snow reflected the exterior lights beyond the threshold. Safety was only a few steps away. "Keep going," Emily told them. Mrs. Bennet caught her hand. "Come with us." Emily almost did. Then she counted the kitchen staff moving past her. 2 cooks. 3 servers. Noah. Mr. Collins. Someone was missing. "Where is Daniel?" she asked. Mr. Collins looked around. "Storage room." Emily turned back before he could stop her. The smoke had thickened, but the sprinklers were beginning to activate overhead. Water struck the tile in a steady roar. Emily found Daniel near the pantry, searching for his phone. "Forget it," she said. "East exit. Now." He started to protest, then saw her expression and obeyed. They reached the ballroom together. Most guests had already evacuated. Royal guards were directing the remaining council members toward the front entrance. Emily searched automatically for Adrian. Table 7 was empty. Relief loosened something in her chest. Then she saw Mason at the western edge of the room. He was moving quickly toward the restricted corridor. Adrian was beside him. Emily stopped. Why would Mason take the Alpha King toward the same hallway where the emergency exit had failed? "Your Majesty," she called. Neither man heard her over the alarm. She moved closer. A guard stepped between her and the corridor. "Main exit, ma'am. The west door is blocked. Please evacuate." "The king just went that way." The guard turned. His expression changed. Emily slipped past him before he could respond. She entered the corridor and immediately felt the air grow warmer. Visibility had fallen to less than 30 feet. Ahead, Mason had one hand near Adrian's shoulder, guiding him through the haze. "The service stairs are this way," Mason called. Emily knew they were not. The service stairs were east. Her stomach dropped. "Adrian," she shouted without thinking about rank. The Alpha King turned at the sound of his name. Mason turned too. Across the smoke-filled corridor, his eyes found Emily. There was no surprise in them. Only recognition. Then he reached for the heavy door beside Adrian. Emily saw the same cold expression she had seen earlier, and suddenly every warning from that evening aligned into one terrible certainty. "Do not follow him," she cried. Mason's hand closed around the door handle. Adrian looked from his beta to Emily. And for the first time that night, the Alpha King hesitated. Adrian's hesitation lasted less than a second, but Emily saw Mason notice it. "Your Majesty, we have to move," Mason said, opening the heavy door. "The main corridor is compromised." Adrian looked toward Emily through the haze. She says this route is wrong. Mason's jaw tightened. She is a waitress. 3 words. Nothing more. Yet Emily heard everything hidden inside them. She was nobody. Her warning meant nothing. Her life carried less weight than his rank. Adrian's expression hardened. She also warned us about the exit before the alarm. Mason went still. Somewhere behind Emily, water rushed from the sprinklers while the emergency alarm continued its relentless pulse. We can discuss that outside, Mason replied. This way. He motioned Adrian through the doorway. Emily knew the room beyond it. It was a private dining room connected to a narrow west passage, not the service stairs Mason had promised. No. She hurried forward. That does not lead outside. Adrian turned toward her again. That was when Mason moved. It happened so quickly that Emily needed a heartbeat to understand what she had seen. Mason stepped behind Adrian and gave him a sudden forceful shove through the doorway. Adrian lost his balance and disappeared into the smoke-filled room beyond. Mason immediately pulled the door toward himself. Mason! Emily shouted. He stopped with his hand still on the handle. Their eyes met across 20 feet of gray haze. The pleasant beta from the dining room was gone. You should have left when you had the chance, he said. Emily's blood turned cold. Why are you doing this? Mason did not answer. He released the door before it fully closed and ran toward the opposite end of the corridor. Come back. Emily called. He never looked behind him. For one stunned moment, she remained where she was. This was Mason Reed. The man entrusted with the Alpha King's safety. The beta who had stood at Adrian's side through councils, ceremonies, and years of public appearances. Emily had expected arrogance from powerful wolves. She had expected to be ignored. She had never expected this. A cough came from beyond the half-closed door. Adrian? No answer. Emily moved closer. Heat pressed through the doorway, and smoke curled across the ceiling. She could see Adrian several yards inside, one hand against a table as he tried to regain his bearings. He was conscious. That mattered. Can you hear me? She called. Adrian lifted his head. Emily? Even now, he remembered her name. Something inside her tightened. The way Mason sent you is not an exit. You need to come back toward my voice. Adrian took a step, then stopped as heavier smoke crossed between them. Emily looked over her shoulder. The corridor behind her still offered a clear path toward the ballroom. She could leave. She had already helped Noah and the others reach safety. Nobody could reasonably ask more of her. Nobody was asking. That was the problem. Adrian had guards, a council, and a beta sworn to protect him. Yet at the moment he needed someone most, every title surrounding him had become useless. Emily pulled the damp towel higher over her mouth. Fear moved through her so sharply that her knees felt weak. She let herself feel it. Then she stepped through the doorway. Keep talking to me, she said. Adrian's gray eyes found hers through the haze. Emily held out her hand. I am not leaving without you. Adrian looked at her outstretched hand as if it were the one thing in the room he had not expected to see. Emily, go back, he said, his voice rough beneath the alarm. You know the way out. So do you now? She kept her hand extended. Come toward me. Another wave of smoke drifted between them, turning the tables and chairs into blurred shapes. Emily lowered herself slightly where the air was clearer and moved closer. Adrian followed her voice until only a few feet separated them. There is a service passage behind the kitchen, she said. It leads directly to the east side of the lodge. Then why are you here instead of using it? Emily stared at him. Because you were not. Something changed in his gray eyes. There was no time to understand it. She reached him and caught his hand. The instant their palms met, warmth rushed through her arm, startling in a place filled with alarms and cold fear. Adrian felt it too. His fingers closed around hers, then loosened immediately, as though giving her the choice to pull away. Emily did not. This way. She led him back through the doorway and into the corridor. The ballroom was visible ahead, but the safest route was no longer the shortest. Smoke had gathered near the western entrance, so Emily turned toward a narrow staff passage beside the pantry. "How do you know this building so well?" Adrian asked. "Waitresses learn every door powerful people never notice." Under different circumstances, she might have regretted saying it. Adrian only nodded. "Tonight I am grateful you did." They reached the kitchen, now nearly empty. Water covered parts of the tile floor from the sprinklers. Emily stopped at the East Service Hall and listened. No voices. No footsteps. Clear. "Stay close." Adrian gave her an incredulous look despite everything. "You are giving the Alpha King orders. You can complain when we are outside." For the first time since Mason's betrayal, something almost like a smile touched Adrian's face. They continued. The cold draft from the exit reached Emily before she saw the door. Relief hit so suddenly that her legs nearly weakened. 10 yards. Then 5. Noah appeared outside through the open doorway, waving frantically. "Emily." She guided Adrian across the threshold. Winter air struck her face, clean and sharp. People gathered across the snow-covered drive beneath emergency lights while lodge staff counted guests. Several royal guards rushed toward Adrian. Emily finally released his hand. The strange warmth vanished with the contact. Adrian noticed. Before either could speak, a familiar voice rose from the crowd. "Your Majesty." Mason Reed pushed through the gathering, his coat damp, his expression shaped into perfect concern. "Thank God. I tried to get back to you, but the smoke separated us." Emily stared at him. Mason looked directly at her. For one terrible second, neither spoke. Then his expression changed to confusion so convincing that even Emily almost doubted what she had witnessed. "Why is she with you?" he asked Adrian. His gaze hardened. "Your Majesty, I saw that waitress near the restricted corridor before the fire." Emily felt the cold more sharply then. Snow gathered along the shoulders of her uniform while emergency lights washed the lodge grounds in red and white. Around them, conversations faded. Council members, staff, and royal guards turned toward Mason as though his words carried the certainty of law. Emily understood immediately what he was doing. Inside the lodge, she had been the only witness. Out here, he was the Alpha King's trusted beta, and she was exactly what he had called her earlier. A waitress. "I was near that corridor," Emily said. Mason gave a slow nod. "You admit it." "I reported the blocked emergency exit. After being discovered where you were not authorized to be." Emily's stomach tightened. He was taking pieces of the truth and arranging them into something ugly. Mason turned toward Adrian. "Your Majesty, she overheard a private conversation earlier. I found her near a restricted area, and shortly afterward the fire alarm began. At minimum, she should be questioned." 2 guards exchanged glances. One stepped toward Emily. Adrian lifted his hand. The guard stopped. "Nobody touches her." His voice was quiet, but the authority in it silenced the entire group. Mason's expression barely shifted. "I am trying to protect you." Adrian looked at him for a long moment. "Are you?" The question seemed to surprise Mason. Emily watched Adrian carefully. His face revealed almost nothing, but she remembered the room, the smoke, the sudden betrayal. He had been conscious. How much did he remember? Mason apparently wondered the same thing. "The smoke may have confused what happened," he said. "You were disoriented." Adrian did not answer. Instead, his gaze moved to Emily. "Tell me exactly what you saw before the alarm." Emily swallowed. I saw Mr. Reed speaking with a man near the west hallway. Later, I found the emergency exit blocked. I reported it to my manager. Then I smelled something strange near the same corridor. Mason sighed as though disappointed. Suspicion is not evidence. No, Emily said. It is not. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, but she refused to look away. I also saw you lead him toward a route you knew was not an exit. Mason's calm finally cracked. Only slightly. That is a serious accusation. I know. From someone who admits she was repeatedly in restricted areas. Emily's hands were cold, but they no longer trembled. Then ask why I was there. Silence followed. Mason stared at her. Adrian did too, but his expression was different. He was listening. Really listening. Emily thought back through the evening. The conversation. The locked door. The chemical smell. Mason telling her to leave. Then another memory surfaced, small enough that she had almost forgotten it. Before the alarm, when Mason had found her near the emergency exit, he had said Royal Security had locked several access points. Several. Emily had only mentioned one door. She looked at him. How many exits did you know were blocked? Mason's face went still. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Emily continued before fear could stop her. I told you about the west emergency door. I never said anything about any other access point. The snowy courtyard became completely silent. Mason opened his mouth, but Adrian spoke first. Neither did I. Mason looked at his king. For the first time that night, Emily saw uncertainty enter the beta's eyes. Adrian stepped closer, his voice calm enough to be frightening. So tell me, Mason. How did you know there was more than one? Mason did not answer immediately. Snow drifted through the emergency lights while the gathered council waited, and Emily watched the beta search for the calm expression he had worn all evening. Security informed me, he said at last. Adrian's gaze did not move. Which officer? Mason hesitated. I would have to check. You remembered enough to accuse Emily 30 seconds ago. The words were quiet, almost conversational, but Mason's confidence thinned. Your Majesty, this is hardly the place for an investigation. For once, we agree. Adrian turned toward the captain of his guard. Secure the lodge perimeter. Nobody leaves until every guest and employee is accounted for. Preserve the security records and staff reports. The captain bowed his head. Yes, Your Majesty. Mason stepped forward. Adrian, listen to me. Emily noticed the change immediately. He had stopped saying Your Majesty. Adrian noticed too. I have been listening to you for 12 years, he said. Tonight I am going to listen to someone else. His eyes found Emily. The attention of the entire courtyard followed. Emily wished it had not. She could already see suspicion on several faces. A councilwoman whispered something to the man beside her. Mr. Collins stood near the staff group looking terrified. Noah looked ready to argue with anyone who approached. Emily drew a slow breath. I do not know what caused the fire, she said. I cannot prove who blocked those doors. I only know what I saw. Mason seized on the admission. Exactly. She cannot prove anything. Adrian turned toward him. Neither can you. That stopped him. Until we know more, Emily is not a suspect simply because her uniform carries less authority than yours. The words settled over the crowd. Emily felt something inside her loosen, but only slightly. She did not want Adrian to believe her because she had saved him. She wanted the truth to survive without owing anyone a favor. There may be another way, she said. Everyone looked at her again. Emily closed her eyes briefly, reconstructing the evening. Mason near the western corridor. The stranger in the dark coat. The glasses touching. Mason asking how long she had been standing there. Then the emergency door. Something else surfaced. The hallway camera. Mason's face changed. Emily pointed toward the lodge. There is a security camera above the pantry entrance. It faces the west corridor. The captain nodded. She is right. Mason recovered quickly. If the system was functioning. It was, Noah called from the staff group. Mr. Collins tried to quiet him, but Noah stepped forward. I saw the monitor in the office before dinner. That camera was working. Emily looked at him with sudden gratitude. Adrian turned to the captain. Retrieve the recording. Mason's jaw tightened. You are trusting a waitress and a teenage busboy over your beta? Adrian's expression became unreadable. No. I am trusting evidence over rank. For the first time, Mason had nothing to say. A royal guard escorted the captain toward the lodge entrance while everyone waited in the falling snow. Adrian moved closer to Emily, lowering his voice. You should get warm. So should you. A faint smile touched his face. Then his eyes dropped to her hand. Emily followed his gaze. Her fingers were trembling again, but not entirely from cold. She remembered the strange warmth when she had taken his hand inside. Adrian seemed to remember it too. Emily, he said quietly, when you found me in that room, did you feel something? Her breath caught. Before she could answer, the captain emerged from the lodge carrying a tablet. His face was grim. He walked directly toward Adrian. Your Majesty, he said, you need to see this. The captain stopped beside Adrian and angled the tablet so only the king and those nearest him could see. Emily did not need to move closer. Mason's expression told her enough. For the first time that evening, the beta looked toward the parking lot instead of Adrian. The captain touched the screen. Grainy security footage showed the western corridor before the alarm. Emily appeared first, carrying glasses. A moment later, Mason entered. With the stranger in the dark coat. There was no audio, but their meeting was unmistakable. The recording jumped forward. Mason returned alone, paused beside the emergency exit, and bent near the door mechanism. Emily felt the courtyard disappear around her. She remembered standing at that same door minutes later, wondering whether she was imagining danger. She had not been imagining anything. Keep playing it, Adrian said. The captain did. The footage showed Emily discovering the blocked exit, Mason confronting her, and eventually the first traces of smoke appearing farther down the corridor. Then came the moment that changed everything. Adrian and Mason entered the camera's view together. Emily appeared behind them. Mason opened the private dining room door. Even without sound, the betrayal was clear. Mason sent Adrian through the doorway, pulled the door toward himself, and ran. Nobody spoke when the recording ended. Adrian stared at the dark screen. Emily had expected anger from him. Instead, she saw something quieter and more painful. 12 years of trust had just been reduced to a few minutes of security footage. Mason finally spoke. You do not understand what you are seeing. Adrian lifted his eyes. Then explain it. Mason looked around at the council members who had once greeted him with respect. I was trying to move you away from the smoke. And leaving me behind accomplished that how? Mason had no answer. Adrian turned to the captain. Remove his authority and keep him under royal supervision until the council completes a formal inquiry. Mason stepped backward. You are choosing her word over mine. Adrian's gaze sharpened. The evidence made the choice. 2 guards approached Mason, not roughly, but with unmistakable purpose. He looked at Emily as he passed. There was resentment in his eyes, but Emily no longer felt small beneath it. She had spent the evening wondering whether anyone would believe a waitress over a beta. In the end, truth had not cared about either title. When Mason was led away, the courtyard remained silent. Adrian handed the tablet back to the captain. Then he turned to Emily. I owe you an apology. She blinked. For what? You warned us about the exit. I allowed someone else's rank to make your warning seem less urgent than it was. Emily studied him. You listened eventually. Eventually can be expensive. His voice carried no royal certainty now. Only regret. Emily glanced toward the lodge, where emergency crews moved beneath the lights. Then listen sooner next time. Adrian gave a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. I will. The simplicity of his answer unsettled her more than a grand promise would have. He looked down at her hand again. There is still something we have not discussed. Emily knew immediately what he meant. The warmth. That impossible pulse when their palms had touched. She folded her fingers against her apron. Maybe tonight has already given us enough mysteries. Adrian nodded, but his wolf seemed to disagree. His eyes briefly flashed silver before returning to gray. Emily's breath caught. Deep inside her, something that had always been quiet suddenly stirred in answer. The stirring inside Emily was so faint she almost dismissed it as exhaustion. She had spent years with an omega wolf so quiet that other wolves sometimes treated her as though she barely carried one at all. Yet beneath the winter air and the fading alarm, she felt a small, unmistakable awareness turn toward Adrian. She pressed a hand against her chest. Emily? His voice softened. I am fine. It was an automatic answer, and Adrian seemed to recognize it. You ran into a lodge everyone else was leaving. You are standing outside in wet clothes while it is 28 degrees. I am beginning to question your definition of fine. Emily looked down at herself. Water from the sprinklers had soaked the sleeves of her uniform. Only now did she notice how badly she was shivering. Adrian removed his coat and offered it to her. She hesitated. That probably costs more than my car. Then try not to spill coffee on it. Emily looked up, startled, and found the faintest smile in his eyes. He remembered their conversation at table 7. She accepted the coat. It was warm from his body, and something about the simple kindness made the evening suddenly feel real. Nearby, council members had gathered beneath a temporary shelter. The captain approached and informed Adrian that everyone had been accounted for and the lodge was being secured. Adrian nodded, then looked toward the assembled council. Before anyone leaves, there is something that needs to be made clear. Emily's stomach tightened. Adrian stepped beneath the shelter. She followed more slowly, wrapped in his coat. Mason was nowhere in sight. The remaining officials fell silent. Emily Carter warned members of this gathering about a blocked emergency exit before the alarm, Adrian said. Her warning was dismissed. When the evacuation began, she helped staff and guests reach safety. Then she returned for someone who had been abandoned. His eyes found hers. That someone was me. Emily felt every face turn toward her. She wished the snow would swallow her. Adrian continued. No one will question her integrity because she lacks a title. The evidence has established what happened tonight, and the formal inquiry will establish the rest. A councilman lowered his head toward Emily. Then another did the same. She did not suddenly feel important. She felt tired. But she also remembered Mason saying she was only a waitress, as though those words should have ended every argument she could ever make. Now Adrian stood before the same powerful people and refused to let rank decide whose truth mattered. When the council dispersed, Emily approached him. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did. Why? Adrian glanced toward the lodge. Because power is useless if it only protects the people who already have it. Emily studied him, surprised by the absence of performance in his voice. Then he turned back to her. But I need you to understand something else. Saving my life does not place you in my debt. She almost laughed. I thought that usually worked the other way around. Either way. His expression became serious. Whatever happened when we touched, whatever it means, you decide what happens next. The quiet presence inside Emily stirred again. She looked at his open hand resting at his side. He did not reach for her. He waited. Slowly, Emily extended her fingers and touched his palm. Warmth moved between them again, stronger this time. Adrian inhaled sharply. Deep inside Emily, the silence she had known her entire life broke with one clear, waking heartbeat. The heartbeat came again. Not from Emily's chest. Deeper. Older. It moved through the quiet place inside her where her wolf had lived for years without ever truly answering. Emily's fingers tightened around Adrian's hand. His gray eyes flashed silver again, but this time she did not look away. You felt that, he said. It was not a question. Emily nodded. I think she did too. Adrian went perfectly still. Your wolf? Emily closed her eyes for 1 second. The presence inside her was no longer distant. She could feel curiosity, warmth, and something almost like recognition. When she opened her eyes, Adrian was watching her with an expression she had never expected from an alpha king. Hope mixed with fear. There is something about the fire I have not told anyone, he said. Emily glanced toward the council members disappearing into waiting vehicles. About Mason? About you. Snow continued falling beyond the shelter, softening the tire tracks across the lodge driveway. Adrian lowered his voice. When Mason left me in that room, the smoke made it difficult to tell where the doorway was. I could hear the alarm, but everything else became confused. He paused. Then I heard you. Emily remembered calling his name. I was shouting. Not that. Adrian looked at their joined hands. Before you reached me, my wolf reacted. The warmth between their palms strengthened. Emily's breath caught. What did he do? Adrian hesitated, and she understood immediately that this man, who had faced an entire council without uncertainty, was afraid of this answer. He called you mate. The world seemed to become very quiet. Emily did not pull her hand away, but Adrian released his grip immediately, leaving her fingers resting freely against his palm. That does not give me a claim over you, he said. A bond is not permission. You saved me because you chose to return. Whatever comes after tonight must be your choice too. Emily looked at him for a long moment. 12 hours earlier, he had been nothing more than a distant king entering a room filled with people far above her station. She had been the waitress expected to carry plates, refill glasses, and remain invisible. Then the fire had stripped every title down to something simpler. Mason had possessed rank and abandoned loyalty. Adrian had possessed power and discovered that power could not force someone to stay. Emily had possessed almost nothing the court valued, yet she had turned around when everyone else was moving towards safety. Do you know why I went back? She asked. Adrian shook his head. Because you were alone. Something in his expression broke open. Not weakness. Relief. Emily slowly took his hand again, this time because no emergency required it. The response was immediate. Warmth swept through her, and the sleeping presence inside her rose fully for the first time. Emily gasped softly. Her wolf was there. Awake. Certain. And beneath the rush of emotion came one clear word. Mate. Adrian saw the answer in her face, but he did not celebrate. He simply waited. Emily smiled through the sudden sting behind her eyes. I heard her. Adrian's voice dropped almost to a whisper. And? Emily looked at their joined hands, then at the Alpha King who had learned in one terrible night the difference between obedience and loyalty. She agrees with yours. Dawn had not yet reached the mountains, but the darkness beyond Blackwood Lodge was beginning to soften. Adrian smiled, small and genuine. Emily realized then that the fire had revealed more than betrayal. It had shown them both something power could never manufacture and rank could never guarantee. When everyone else had chosen themselves, one forgotten Omega had chosen kindness. And the king who could command an entire territory finally understood why his wolf had chosen her.